What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Very Blessed podcast. My name is Derek.
I'm Kayla.
And we are the Berries. Okay, so this week on the podcast, we want to talk about relationships. But before we get there, we want to welcome everybody that is coming in for the first time. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun YouTube stuff. Click on those notification bells and turn them on just so you don't miss a video. All right. How was your weekend? It was busy, huh?
Yes, so this past weekend, I went to Minnesota Mall America with Athena, who is my daughter, and then my niece Morgan. It was a great time, a nice little girls' weekend. Enjoyed spending time with the girls. Just had some one-on-one time with them, so we enjoyed ourselves. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. Obviously, I was in Jacksonville celebrating my grandmother's 80th birthday. Everybody missed you. It was a great time. So it was just really, really nice to be able to spend time with her. And just really quickly, before we get into the relationship part of the video, we do want to say thank you to all of the veterans who gave up their lives on this great Memorial Day. Thank you for all that has served, and for those of you who have family members that tragically did pass, giving up their lives in service. It's just great that God has blessed us with such a awesome country to where we have men and women that fight for our freedom. So thank you all. Okay, let's jump into it. Relationships. Now, look, we're not claiming to be relationship experts or anything of the sort, but we've kind of been through some things. Kayla and I have been married for about a year and a half now. We've known each other, though, for about 14 years. And prior to getting married, we were together for 4. So we've kind of been through all of the phases. Today, we want to talk about the phases and talk about kind of how we made it through those phases, but then kind of share, kind of our ups and downs, but more so our downs, because I feel like in order for people not to make the same mistakes as other people make, they need to hear about those mistakes. So that's going to be kind of our focus today. And we want to start, obviously, with the first step in a relationship, which happens before the relationship, and that is being single.
Yes.
When you think of being single, what comes to mind for you?
I feel like if you're single, you not so much, just depending on the person, you only care about your needs. But for me, having a daughter, I couldn't just only care for my needs, but for my daughter's needs as well. So single, just depending on where you're at in your life at that point of time, is like taking care of for any dependents or as well as yourself. But mostly like for yourself, you're trying to either figure out what you want in life, either going to travel, not settling down, all those kind of different avenues that you kind of have to get a feel for, because a lot of people are not, especially the younger generation now, they don't believe in being committed relationships, either bouncing around or just traveling, and just don't want that committed issues, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Like with me, I used to view being single as freedom.
Yeah, freedom too.
As an opportunity for me to, as the kids say, do me. I could do whatever I wanted to do with zero consequences.
Yeah.
And now looking back in hindsight, that just was the wrong attitude to have. And I think that's what took me so long to get to where I'm at now, which, again, no regrets for that. But if I had it to do all over again with the knowledge that I have now, things would definitely be different. So I wrote down a definition of single here that says says only one, not several. So the true definition of being single is still relational, but it's just relational with yourself, right? So for people that are single, my advice, and again, take it or leave it, would be to find out what you want in life. Find out about yourself. Really take time to get to know yourself. Self-awareness and emotional intelligence is huge. You want to be able to know yourself before you try to get to know someone else. And again, man, if 16-year-old me probably would not have listened to me now, which whatever. I was a kid. That's when I started dating, right? It was about around age 16. But I wish that 21-year-old me would have listened, because I could have saved myself a lot of heartache if I just had gotten to know myself first before trying to be with someone else. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Middle school, high school dating is definitely different than, when you're in your 20s or your 30s or 40s. It's definitely different. So would say, yeah, definitely finding yourself, loving yourself first, and figure out what you want in life so you're not hopping in and out of relationships looking for something that you don't know 100% if you want it or not. So, yeah, if I could go back to and like look back, like, okay, Kayla, you should have never done that. You should have never hopped in that relationship. Just planned it a lot more better than dealing with a lot of those relationships that, I mean, they're learning lessons, life lessons, of course, but looking back, like, oh, I could have saved myself for heartache or pain or anger. A lot of relationships were anger related too. So,
Yeah, I think that a lot of times that when I go back to talking about emotional intelligence, which essentially just means you're aware of your feelings and
mhm.
you're aware of how to not just control them, but to anticipate them when they're going to happen. And I think a lot of times what people miss is when another person comes into your life, it brings a new dynamic to where you don't know them. So you don't know if they're going to push buttons that you have. So knowing what your buttons are, so
Yeah.
that if they are pushed, you don't take it necessarily personally. That's what I'm
Like
trying to say.
setting those
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having that conversation is like, okay, hey, look, this is a right, a boundary of
Yeah.
mine. Or this is kind of a button of mine that I don't really like
Yeah.
pushed. I don't like this boat rocked.
Yeah.
Having that conversation and being open and upfront and honest with somebody. And then when that person shows you that they want to continue to push those buttons or continue to push those boundaries, you know that you don't want anything to do with that person. Then it saves you time, right? So yeah, again, that single phase is huge. It's not about experimenting and all of those types of things like everybody thinks it is.
Yeah.
Uh, it's more about, hey, learning yourself, learning what makes you tick, and learning what you want in a potential partner
Yeah.
is going to save you so much time, heartache, and again, just feelings, emotions. That brings me then to the next phase. People equate dating and a relationship to be two different things. And this is where we kind of disagree a little bit, because I believe they're one and the same. I believe that you can date someone and be in a relationship with someone and it's essentially the same. But if you really think about it, and this is just me, if you really think about it, whether you're casually dating someone or in a committed relationship with someone, you're still sharing the same experiences. So when you're in a relationship with someone, you're dating them, you're taking them out, y'all are outside. When you are in a committed relationship, you're taking them out on dates, you're taking them outside. Okay, so this is where we disagree, right? Let me give you a little context here. This is where we are disagreeing on this. Kayla says that we never had a first date, and that's because, again, a little context here. We met 14 years ago, and this was after I had actually gotten out of a very serious relationship, actually a marriage. I was actually finalizing my divorce, and I was in the process of moving to Denver. But there was obviously still some attraction between the two of us. We wanted to hang around one another, and there was quite a few times that we were outside together, right? That we went and we had food together. We went and we did things together. So in my mind, the first time that we went out to have food together, which I believe was a Buffalo Wild Wings, if I'm not mistaken, because you loved Buffalo Wild Wings back then.
It was either Buffalo Wild Wings or sushi.
Sounds, yeah. Oh, okay, so
I think it was,
Takumi and Madison.
yeah, I think sushi was the first one.
So to me, that's a date. To Kayla, it's not.
I mean, we were more friends. It wasn't like anything like me dating is like, okay, we have interest. It's more like, okay, went out with a friend, not like a date. There wasn't any really that big serious talk until later, which was almost a year later when we had that serious, not even a year, maybe like 6 to 8 months later, we had that serious talk of where we were at. It was more like, okay, friends, male and a female just going out, but it wasn't like a date though.
And see, that's where I a little bit disagree, because we knew that there was obvious attraction between us. But it wasn't just a friendship though. So I think that's where it gets super technical with a lot of people, where they're like, well, we're just friends, but there's extra curricular activity sometimes that's going on between two friends. To me, that's not really a friendship. That's dating. But again, it was not a full-blown relationship, committed relationship, because of the circumstances. So I just feel like the dating phase kind of blends in with the relationship phase, because the attitude is the same. Even for those, again, who say that they're in a casual relationship, they're doing the same exact things that people in committed relationships do. They just try to define it as casual. And as we know, most casual relationships don't work, because eventually one person or both are going to have serious feelings for one another. And that's going to then kind of get to the point where they're going to have a conversation and say, hey, look, we either define the relationship or we discontinue the relationship. But either way, it is a relationship, right? Because they're saying we have to define it or we have to move on from it. I guess that's my point.
That's your point. That's fine.
Yes.
That's your point. Before that, we kind of just swept it under the blanket for what, maybe 6 months?
I think
6 to 7 months.
And I think a lot of that had to do with, I knew I was going back to Colorado.
Yeah.
And so
it was more towards the end, maybe, I want to say maybe 7, 8 months. We finally had that conversation of our feelings after, hanging out, because I didn't know what your feelings were, and then probably vice versa, until we had that conversation. I didn't know, because our age difference, mind you, we are 6 years apart. That, you being older, like, I didn't know if you wanted that type of relationship. So I didn't know 100% how to. I thought it was more of two people hanging out and not dating, because we never really had that conversation. It wasn't really brought up though either, until literally before you left for Colorado.
Define the relationship, folks. Define the relationship.
Don't wait.
Don't let it get to that point. Define the relationship. It might save you a lot of time and effort. Just define it.
But yeah, do you get what I'm saying?
I do. I understand what you're saying.
Because we didn't really have that conversation until right before you left.
So it was one of those situations too that's, the long distance relationship at that point, it just would not have worked. And I think that we both kind of came to that conclusion and found that was the case. And we lost contact for quite some time.
But you were checking in here once in a while.
Check in every now and then.
Like once a year.
Slide into DMs once a year or so, just to see how things work. Okay, so relationships, as we kind of got a little bit off track, but not really. We were still talking about relationships. But the relationship part of things, I think, then becomes, hey, I know what I want. Does my significant other or my potential significant other know what they want. And notice I was very pointed when I said potential significant other. Relationships, especially ones that we want that are going to be godly or we want that are going to last. It doesn't make sense to date someone long term that you do not see a future with. What we know about this life is a couple of things. Number one is that we all have an expiration date and we're going to leave this earth at some point. And number two, time is limited then. That's what that means essentially, is that time is limited. So I've been in these types of relationships before where I saw that the relationship was ending, and because I didn't want to hurt that person's feelings, I continued the relationship and waited for that person to either get fed up with me or just eventually word vomit it out, instead of just ending it when I knew that the relationship was over. I feel like it's only fair to the other person. If you do not see a future with them, stop dragging them along and just end it. And that gives you the opportunity and the other person the opportunity then to find someone else if that's your desire at that point.
Right. I'm completely opposite. I'll tell you, I'm done. This ain't working for me. I was a complete opposite. Breaking off with a few.
I think though, a lot of times people tend to stay in relationships for a few different reasons. I guess the number one reason that a person stays in a relationship too long with another person is if those two people have children together. And to that, I say two things. Number one, don't do that, because that's only going to hurt not just you and your significant other, but your kids as well. And number two, it's like, once again, when you're in that single phase, if you know what you want, and then you get into a relationship with someone and that's not mashing up, you probably should make sure that you don't have children with that person. Because if that happens, well, you're stuck in that situation then for 18 years. Not saying that you're stuck necessarily in the actual relationship itself, but you're stuck tied to that person for the next 18 years. And that does a disservice to you, that does a disservice to them, and it does a disservice, unfortunately, then to your children. Now, look, co-parenting can work. We've seen it happen time and time again. Both of us are in a situation where we both co-parent. And we are in situations where we co-parent with two people that are pretty easy to co-parent with, which that's not the norm. Now, look, I would not recommend it to absolutely anyone, but I do have to say that my daughter's mother and her daughter's father are easy to co-parent with. It hasn't always been that way, but I thank God that it is that way now.
I mean, for my situations, anytime I knew that the relationship was over or it wasn't going anywhere or if it was toxic, I got out of that relationship multiple times. And just for my sanity, my mental health, there has been plenty of times that I left because it was just not good. It was toxic. It was not a good environment for my daughter. One relationship, well, two of them were not a good relationship for my daughter in regards to, other situations happening around you. And that is just not good. It's not going to go anywhere. That person, you can't just change somebody. And if they're not going to change, they keep saying they're changing, but 3 months, 6 months, a year down the road, they're not changing. Then it's like, okay, you can't change anybody that doesn't want to be changed. And that's another thing too. I feel like a lot of people stay in relationships because they're like, oh, okay, let me give them another year. They're going to change. Hey, I can change them. You can't change anybody that doesn't want to be changed.
That person actually has to actively want to change.
Yeah.
That brings me to the second reason to why people stay in relationship, and that is love. right? That LOVE word. And I've got some definitions for that. And I've got 5 total, but the first 4 here are kind of actually the same. It's just we start out as with the word as a noun, and then we transition to the word as a verb. So, number 1, an intense feeling of deep affection. Number 2, a great interest and pleasure in something. Number 3, as a verb, feel of deep affection for, like a person. And to like or enjoy very much, like if you really like a sport or something like that. But here's the best this is the best definition of love that I could find on the web. And this one says a complex and multifaceted emotion involving deep affection, tenderness, and a strong desire for the well-being of another person. Yeah. I think that one's good, but it's missing something specific, and that is the fact that love is supposed to also endure. And when I say endure, it should endure all, right? It should really endure all things. But love is also a lot of different things. So when we're talking about enduring, there shouldn't be as many of the lows as there are the peaks. You're gonna have lows. It just happens. But those peaks should make it worth it. So Corinthians 13, 4 and 5, Paul tells us that love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it's not rude, it's not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no record of wrongdoings. I cannot tell you how many previous relationships I've been in that anytime that something would go wrong, we said that we were over the past, but something would go wrong and then the past would be brought up. Yeah. And I'm not just saying that person, me too. I was just as guilty of bringing up the past. But in true love, that type of stuff does not happen. One thing that I have to say about our relationship is that of all the combined time, even before we were, like official, like 5.5 years ago, go back even the 14 years, there's never been disrespect in our relationship. So correct me if I'm wrong, but on your side, you've never made me feel belittled. You've never made me feel like I'm not worthy. You've always made me feel equal, and never like I am stupid or not intelligent. There's never been that, and there's never been that like excessive name calling. And the sad thing to say is that this is the first relationship that I've ever been in that I've never been called out of my name, and I've never been felt belittled. And I think that's when you know that it's a relationship that is built on love, and that it's built on a good foundation, a godly foundation, because there's respect. Right.
Yeah. The same thing for me. I've been called so many names that I couldn't even count in past relationships because the other person's angry about a situation or not coming home on work from time, but you're trying to make extra money for the household, and you call out your name because you're coming home from work late, but you're just trying to thrive and make that money for the household. So yeah, the same thing. This is my first relationship where I wasn't calling my name.
Again, I have to keep going back to this because since I have really gotten serious as a Christian in my walk, the way that I have carried myself has changed drastically. So I'm not sitting here at all and saying that I have never called anyone out of their name. And because I have, I absolutely have. There's been previous relationships where, someone would say something to me and then I would shout right back at them and not apologize. And that's the other part too, is I was not apologetic. I was very proud. And that's one of the things that it says here in First Corinthians, that love is not proud. But I was a very proud person when it came to that. It was one of those things where it's like, you call me something, oh, I'm going to dig deeper and I'm going to call you something worse. And then I'm going to wait for you to apologize to me. If I don't get that apology, well, I don't feel like I was in the wrong, which I just, again, looking back at that, it's just so backwards for someone that you claim to love, that you would do something like that. So with that, I guess that's the biggest thing, right? Is kids in love are the reason that people stay together. But is it true love? And on top of that, don't allow kids to be a pawn in a game of chess that you're playing with someone. If you're not compatible anymore, split.
Yeah.
It's difficult. It's hard to do split, but in the end, it's going to be so much better. There's peaks and valleys of every relationship. Our relationship is not perfect. As a matter of fact, for those that don't know, we live approximately 1,680.2 miles away from one another. We are filming this right now in Madison, Wisconsin, and I live in Phoenix, Arizona. So it's definitely been trying over the last 5.5 years. But because we have trust, because we have great communication, because we just all of those things, the respect piece that we were just talking about, it works and it works well.
And then also putting God 1st in our relationship too, and letting God take that relationship and just kind of mold our relationship has worked. I feel like if we didn't have God first and just like in our individual selves, but also in our relationship, I feel like it wouldn't work. Because most of the time, talking to people, out in the grocery store or, any place, they'll be like, oh, where's your husband? Or like, lives in Arizona. How does that work? Great. And first thing I say, good. I should say God first and foremost, because there's no way without God it wouldn't be possible. But communication is a big key. Having that open communication, and sometimes conversations are hard. Don't always want to tell your significant other, hey, I'm having a bad day. This is what's going on. This is going on. Those are hard, but they have to be done. Those conversations have to be done. There has to be that open communication, that open line of, hey, I'm having a bad day or this happened. And, and also listening to your partner is another thing too. Kind of like being there and not like, okay, why did you do this? And like, basically being that mom or dad and just kind of belittling somebody. You can't do that. Just having that communication and just being open and, having that love of communication too is a big thing. I mean, a big part of a long distance relationship.
Yes, it has to be talked about. It has to be said, because if your feelings aren't out there, it's just going to be suppressed. And when you suppress, feelings and suppress emotions, eventually it leads to an explosion. We've had a couple of those, but
Well, I would say maybe two.
Oh, like I said, a couple. We've had a couple of those.
Oh, two.
It's been a while. It's been quite a while since we've had one, but we've had a couple of those.
Yeah.
Gosh, day before our wedding, which was one that I can remember very vividly. But okay, before we get into the marriage piece, because I want to back up a little bit and kind of just explain our story a little. So, like we had talked about, we met about 14 years ago. I moved to Colorado and kind of lost contact. But about 5.5 years ago, we kind of reconnected, began dating, began the long distance thing.
We tried it out to see if it would work.
Well, it obviously worked.
Yes. Well, I mean, I'm just saying we tried it out first because we didn't know how it was going to work out. Because we started dating, mind you, in November of 2019, and doing the long distance, and then COVID-19, 2020 in March. So that was also interesting. That kind of puts some hardship of traveling back and forth and seeing a little bit, but not so much. I mean, it was still kind of like, okay, with my job, I remember with the job I was at, we couldn't really travel. It wasn't really allowed. We did a road trip during that time. I wasn't supposed to do that at that time. And then I was traveling back and forth. In regards to that time, I mean, tickets were cheap. That was like one of the best things. Nobody was hardly even flying. Flights weren't full. Tickets were dirt cheap. And we were just like just kind of left and right, just flying nonstop.
Yeah, I can recall just several trips being legitimately $40
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah.
$20
ticket
for one way. Yeah, COVID was interesting because, we had pretty much just started dating, so we kind of had to try to make it work through all of the shutdowns and everything of that nature. And when that finally kind of passed, I think that's actually when it got a little harder because I don't really think the COVID time was difficult. In the beginning, it was because we didn't know, if we were going to be able to travel. So in the beginning, yes, kind of difficult. But then after a while, it was like, again, $20 tickets and whatnot. It was kind of easier then to be able to see each other. But then after, I think that's when the true test was, because tickets went back up. They were expensive. People were traveling. And then it was kind of
like the floodgates open.
Yeah.
And then people were just.
So it was sparse. Like we were seeing each other like once a month.
Yeah.
At some time. So, I think getting through that was I think that really was the point where I kind of started to realize, okay, this is working better than I thought it was going to work. But at the same time, I was very, very eager to, make the relationship work on a more local basis. And then the London trip, which, man, never thought that I would travel overseas because of just how freaked out I am about flying over water.
I was even surprised. The first, I remember, I think it was a text message.
Yeah.
You asked me about London, and I'm like, really? Of all places, London? I was like, are you sure?
And I had a great cover up because the Denver Broncos, Denver sports fan, the Denver Broncos were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars in London that year. And it was a perfect cover up because I wanted to do something that was a little more extravagant for a proposal. And the original idea was to go out to London, and then there's a bullet train that actually goes to Paris. So the plan was to take you to London, then we take the bullet train to Paris and propose at the Eiffel Tower. So I was like, man, I'm going to get the biggest brownie points. But it was during they call it fall holiday out there. So the Eiffel Tower was sold out, and all you could do is just go like to the Eiffel Tower. You couldn't actually go up and do the tour.
I think even tickets from like the bullet train were like full already too.
No, the bullet train still had some tickets, but the other part too was I talked to a buddy that had went over to Paris, and he's like, they're not as good at speaking English over there either, so you might have some difficulties. He said, it's still touristy enough to where you could probably get around, but you might have some issues. Versus in London, obviously everybody speaks English, and it was so easy to communicate, and it was just we were having such a good time in London anyway. The biggest issue that I had there is that just finding the time to propose, because every time that we went out to eat, we were sat with people. Yeah. That's just something that they do out there. It's not like here where you get like private tables. A lot of times they sit you with people. So that was a little difficult. So finally, popped the question. I was supposed to be on Facebook Live and everything, but my service was awful. But popped the question, and then my one condition was what?
Get married in 1 year.
Yep. Yeah, 1 year.
I thought you were crazy.
I didn't want it to drag. I didn't want it to drag on. I've heard horror stories of people that have like these 5-year engagements and whatnot, and I didn't want that. I
I
wanted
had
it
a
to have.
cousin that had what 20-year
Yeah,
engagement.
no,
So
I wanted nothing to do with that. After that, gosh, so this was in November. Sorry, no, this was in October. This was just before Halloween. But what really, really signified and just secured everything was, man, that was October, November, December, January, like just 5 months later, my mom passed away. Very unexpectedly, very quickly. And we were only, what, 7, 8 months away from the wedding. And it got chaotic a little bit because, then everybody was like, okay, are you going to postpone the wedding? And, what's going to happen and all of these things.
well, we took a little break because
Yeah.
we took care of everything with the memorial and services for your mom, and kind of took a little break from the wedding and just kind of sit still for a second, and then which we got a lot of the things done.
Yeah,
a lot of that stuff we got done right away, like right when we got back from London. Not even a week or two later, we were looking at venues.
Yeah.
So we already had our venues selected. I already had my dress picked in December. So like a lot of that stuff, like I already picked out my colors, and X, Y, and Z was just a lot of that stuff was already done.
Right.
Because the venue did most of that stuff already, like the cake and all that stuff. A lot of that stuff was already done. It was just kind of the miscellaneous up to closer. So it was kind of a little standstill for us.
Yeah.
Which was fine because we got a lot of that stuff already done.
Yeah, no, it was obviously a time that was, again, not expected, and a time that was trying. But getting through that and still being able to get to, I call it the finish line, because it was just a lot of planning and a lot of invitations and it was everything, right? It was just there was just a lot that was going on at the time. So for us to be able to get from where I was emotionally and mentally in March when she passed, up until then, walking down the aisle in November, it took a lot. So the fact that, again, we were able to get through it, you stuck by me, and that just meant everything. And that's what I'm getting to, like when you come to from this transition of going from being in a relationship to being in a marriage. These types of moments will happen. I'm not saying that your mom or someone that you're close to necessarily passes away, but those trying moments are going to happen. And is the person that you're with by your side during that? Or do they ghost? Do they wait for you to recover? Do they just say, get over it? You know what I mean? Like, what is their attitude? What is their heart posture when you're going through those types of things? Because I think that's huge. And if you find someone that will stick by you, will be patient with you, right? Remember, love is patient, love is kind. That's someone that you should marry. But knowing that even when you get through something like that, and then you get into the marriage part of things, marriage is a completely and totally different monster. It's completely and totally different from being in a relationship. I don't care if you've been in a relationship for 20 years. The second that you get married, things are different. Things change. You might not feel different right away, but you have to understand that the commitment that you make in a marriage is not just between you and your significant other. It's between you, your significant other, and God. Forget the people and the witnesses that are there. It's you're committing yourself to this person for the rest of your life. And from someone who has been divorced. That, I was married previously. I was in a marriage for 5 years previously, but at that time I was 21 years old, didn't really understand what marriage was. My ex-wife was 18 at the time that we got married, didn't understand what marriage was. We were destined to fail. And if I'm being completely and totally honest, we were pressured. I grew up in a very religious household, a household that said, look, if you're going to live together, that you should be married. And that's exactly what happened is we felt pressured. We got married, and it turned out to be a disaster. The other part of this that you have to look at is, are you equally yoked? Is God in the marriage? Equally yoked means, do they have the same values that you have? A Christian marrying a non-believer is not wise because you don't have the same beliefs. You don't have the same values. Someone that's a non-believer marrying another non-believer. Is there anything? Can you really say that marriage is not going to work? No, of course not. They're more equally yoked in that aspect. They have a better chance of remaining married than someone that is a non-believer and a Christian. But with that said, when we look at the statistics behind it, this is something I wrote down too. Divorce rates in the church versus divorce rate outside of the church. Can you guess what it is?
It's probably higher in the church.
It's not, but it's the same.
Oh, it's the same.
50% divorce rate in the church, 50% divorce rate out of the church. However, most of the time, people that get married in the church marry non-believers that they have met witnessing to. And those non-believers then are converted Christians that come to church with them. But once things break down in that relationship, go back to being non-believers. And again, I just feel like that's just backwards. We feel like we can save people. And that's not what we're called to do. We're not called to save people. We're called to witness. Sure. We're called to teach people about the sacrifice that Jesus made and whatnot. But if they accept it, awesome, great. Yeah. If they don't, that's still okay. Right. We move on from that. But because it's not us that saves them. It's God. It's Jesus that saves them. So for me, it was always important that I found someone, if I was going to get married again, found someone that was a believer, that had strong beliefs and was, again, equally young.
Yeah. No, growing up for me, mind you, I never was married before this marriage, of course. But both of my parents have been married together, divorced, and then they both were remarried, divorced. Now still both divorced. So coming from, both sides, both of my parents being divorced twice, that was kind of more common for me. Literally, the only really good relationship was my mom's my mom's parents. They've been married for over 50 plus years. In regards to that, yeah, like divorce was a thing. It was, I don't want to say normal. I hate to say normal. Normal is not really a good thing to say to divorce, but it was just kind of that fear for me growing up of, okay, I'm going to get married. Am I going to get a divorce? Because my parents have not tried it once, but twice. So like that was more of a fear for me. And in a previous relationship, they tried to propose to me, but my dad said no, like didn't give him a time or a day. And so like, because that person really didn't know me, how my dad described it. But, I think God, and I think God, giving that knowledge to my dad of saying like, hey, because who knows, I could have maybe married that person and I already knew it would have failed because of just that relationship. It was not a good relationship. So I thank God for being present in my life and in my dad's life to say, this man, no, like, no, kind of given that. But just, just the simple fact of knowing who you want to marry is just kind of like, okay, are we, like you said, equally yoked? Are you on the same page? Do you have the same beliefs? If you do decide to have children together, do you want to raise them the same way? That's a big thing too. Having those conversations and being, another big reason why people get divorced is finances, financially, or somebody cheats, not being faithful is a big thing too. So, divorce is very high on that conversation of, I guess, yeah, I could see it 50-50 in the church and the outside world, because it's like, I mean, also the younger generation, they don't believe in, a lot of them don't believe in commitment, because, they've had divorced parents, because I never thought I would get married growing up, because seeing that and seeing a lot of failed relationships and unhealthy relationships, for myself, but also, my parents being in, certain relationships, other people in my family seeing their relationships. I have some family members that have been divorced more than twice. So, just seeing that, I'm like, okay, that's just not in the cards for me. God maybe doesn't want me. Maybe I'm just not that person not to be married. And some people are not meant to be married. So,
yeah, the Apostle Paul never got married. He wasn't in a committed relationship anywhere that we see in the New Testament of the Bible. And he talks about it in the Bible, saying that it's okay not to be married.
yeah.
It's okay to be single, and to just commit your life to something higher.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, that's really what it's about. Is your significant other making you a better person? If your significant other is dragging you down or making you do things that you do not want to do, that's probably not the right person for you. And you probably want to figure that out before you get married, because it's a lot easier to just end a relationship than it is to divorce. Divorces can get extremely messy, as we know, now than ever. You don't have as many weddings as what you've had in the past, and because of that, the birth rate is down as well.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations where that the more that you look at it, and the way that the world is changing and whatnot, people want to be so free, kind of as I defined being single. Like I looked at that as being free. If you can't please one person, how the heck are you going to please multiple people? And so the moral of this is that people still believe in monogamous relationships, but they just don't want them. I think is what it's coming down to now. Is people are less interested in being in relationships. They would rather things just remain casual or them be single, because of how relationships are. There were, but they can be really good. They can be really beautiful if they're done correctly. Again, it starts with the person being single and doing life right. If you do single life correctly, it just sets you up for success in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just kind of looking back of, okay, what do I want? Do I want marriage? Do I want another person in my space, or do I just know I don't want somebody in my space? Do I want kids? Do I not want kids? Like having those conversations of what you really want before getting in a relationship, and seeing, or nowadays, some women can't have kids, a cat, a dog, a chicken, a horse, whatever, that kind of stuff. And, having those open communication with yourself of, okay, what do I really want in a relationship? What can I see myself? Who can I see myself marrying in my marriage material? And sometimes, like, you got to have that conversation at an early age. Yes, 19, 18 years old is kind of young, but still also like, okay, yeah, down the line, and just kind of repeating those conversations too, because of, being young, you don't want that right away. You might want to travel. and stuff, because also like having a spouse that wants to go places with you, and not that also can not work. If somebody that just wants to be a homebody and just stay in the house, don't want to do anything, but then you want to go and travel and do things and try new things, try new foods, that person doesn't want to. So you got to have those conversations of, okay, who do I want in a partner? What do I want to see my partner, if they're, a homebody or like to go places? You got to look at that stuff and seeing it through, from the outside in, through family and friends. I've seen marriages where they were in marriages and the other person didn't want to go anywhere, but that person wanted to do X, Y, and Z, but they're like, no, you can do it yourself. Like, who wants to be in a relationship, let alone a marriage, and they don't want to go somewhere?
Yeah. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the whole point. You want to be in a relationship because you want to share those experiences with someone else.
And seeing like, okay, marriage isn't bad. It's not like a forbidden thing. It's not taboo, for sure. So like having those conversations, I know I've had the conversation with my daughter. She wants to get married someday and have kids. I'm like, great, make sure it's with the right person, make sure, they treat you right. So having those open conversations and not being, again, when it comes to marriage, be having those open communication talk. And, even though sometimes it's a little hard or a little uncomfortable, I have those talks with my daughter all the time about marriage and kids, having kids one day and all that stuff. It's like having those in a marriage also with your kids, with the younger generation of, hey, yes, great, you want to get married, you want to have kids, make sure you get your life and your ducks in a row, all that, get a career, and then find somebody that loves you for you, and putting God first, and all that is just kind of breaking that mold of like, okay, this is the right way to do it, and seeing it through your kids of like, okay, this is the right way to do it. Don't do it like mom did it. I did have a kid at 18, got pregnant when I was 17, had my daughter when I was 18, just not even 2 months later, less than a month and a half later, after I turned 18, I had my daughter at a very young age. I thank God for her every day 'cause she's amazing. She made me a mom, which a lot of women can't say that right now. They would give their left arm and their kidney just to have a kid, and they can't have one. They can't either, they're not in a relationship, or, just can't have kids just in general because, medical or whatever reason and stuff like that. Just having those good relationships, let alone with your significant other, your partner, spouse, whatever, your fiance, but also having it in your kids. Yeah.
It all just boils back down to what you want out of life.
Mm-hmm.
But also just realizing that putting God first is going to get you everything that you want in life. Now, what you want in life versus what God wants in life for you sometimes are two completely different things. I think a couple of years ago, I really got serious and said, man, you know what? Let me just start living my life more morally, more godly, and get into my word. And I can tell you, I've never been happier. More things have never went better. Our marriage, I think, is better for it. Walking into the marriage with that mindset, I think has just made our relationship that much better.
Right.
Again, not always rainbows and butterflies, folks. Not always rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah.
There are still trials, tribulations, and all of those types of things. But I'm telling you, if you keep God first, you see a huge difference in the way that people react to you, and the way that you react to people, more importantly, changes. And it's for me, I've seen a huge change.
Me too. And also, like, when situations come to, like if you put God first, you know, situations that do come, if it's my way, his way, or both of our ways, of the way to handle it too. Um, Definitely, like when it comes to marriage, of like, okay, we run into this situation, how are we going to respond? Are we going to yell at each other? Are we going to talk it out? Are we going to, one person going to shut down? Are we both going to shut down? Are we going to, one's going to go far left, one's going to go far right? Like, you know, having those conversations when situations do come up is a big thing too, because, you know, yes, marriage is great, but like you said, it's not always rainbows and sunshine and unicorns and all that stuff. And it's definitely not. There's, you know, situations that do come your way, unfortunately, and it happens in every marriage. No marriage is perfect. And just how you're going to handle it, if it's, you know, medically, mentally, physically, emotionally type of situation, is definitely how you process it. How are you going to handle it? And many of our situations that we've had since we've been married, we put God first. And that has definitely shown in our marriage of like, okay, you know, yes, it sucks. It's not a good conversation. Don't want to have this conversation right now, but we have to. But putting God first and praying about it, or praying together on certain things, and just kind of like, okay, if it's God's will, it's God's way. God wants to make this happen, he'll make it a way. But also, you know, putting God first, getting you through those stuff. Like, okay, you know, that happened X, Y, and Z ago, either if it's a couple days ago, weeks, months, or whatever, I got through it. And that was, you know, usually if you're through a situation, you're like, man, that was the hardest thing for us to get through. And it's like, then another thing comes and it's like, oh man, that was the hardest thing got to do. And it's like, now you look back and I was like, okay, wasn't that bad?
In the moment, it seems like it is, but then
Yeah.
once you get past things, it's over.
Right.
It's just past. All right, so I think that's a good spot for us to stop and do our recap really quickly here. So single life. Single life is, once again, the word single means only one, not several. Single life is for you.
Yeah.
Okay, it's for you to be able to figure out who you are, who you want to be, figuring out your self-awareness. You know, what are your buttons? Figuring out if those buttons get pushed, if those boundaries get pushed, how will you react? So not only being able to recognize what they are, but anticipate how you're going to behave. Number two is the actual relationship aspect of it. And the relationship aspect of it is getting to know the other person. Do they push those buttons? Do they push those boundaries? And if they do, we politely just ask them, hey, you might want to stop doing that.
Yeah.
And if they don't, that's probably not your person. And then there's the marriage aspect, which is beautiful. It's great, but it's not always rainbows and sunshine. As my wife always says, the key to a great marriage is communication. You got to communicate even when you don't feel like doing it. So we hope that this really helped you. We hope that this blessed you, and you know, we're going to be on a lot more in the future now that we have the equipment set up at both houses. We'll be able to come to you a lot more often. We appreciate you clicking on our video. Do all the YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, comment, click the notification bell, just so you see all those videos that are upcoming. Until then, my name's Derek.
And I'm Kayla.
And we're the Berries.